What's going on, man? How you doing this week?
Well, I was doing pretty good until my new bathtub arrived.
Yeah,
And
still with the remodel after all these weeks.
Still with the remodel, but now it's going to be the remodel.
Oh no!
Apparently, because this is a lesson in getting your ducks in a row and being real sure before you pull triggers. And apparently, it's supposed to have 4 separate outlets on 4 separate circuits instead of 2 outlets on 2 circuits.
The bathtub has to have 4 outlets?
The bathtub, it's insane. It's got like 4, it's got 2 big blowers in it. It's got an inline heater. It's got another blower for bubbles, for, just normal bubble bath bubbles.
That seems excessive for a tub.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
It's like Lulu was like, "You're insane," when I showed her what I wanted.
That seems accurate.
But I told her, I said, we're probably going to live with this thing for like 20 years, so
You might as well get a good one.
that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, oddly enough, I don't know if it should be called an interest or a fetish, but oddly enough, I've got this thing about designing bathrooms.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, like I have like once in a while I'll have like these thoughts about how I would want my bathroom to be if I could just go from the ground up, and let's just say that it needs a lot of room.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah, we don't need to get too personal.
Yeah, in the era of P. Diddy, I don't think people want to be in public talking about bathroom design.
I don't even think you want to flirt with that, my man.
Yeah.
It'll just get us canceled before we even get started here.
Yeah, is even saying that now, like saying P. Diddy, is
I don't know.
Is that a cancelable offense
I think
on
you have
YouTube?
to. I think you have to wait like a certain amount of time before you can start making fun of things that are relevant. Too soon.
Well, I mean, the actions alleged were like 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, but we're just finding out about it now.
Why on earth did he have 1,000 bottles of baby oil now?
I don't even want to speculate, my man. I don't even want to go down that road.
I mean, that's a lot of skincare.
I don't even know what to say. It was ridiculous. The story that I keep hearing, and Calvin keeps telling me more every time I talk to him. I keep hearing new things. It's all horrible. Yeah. I don't know.
That's how we are. But that's how we are as humans, right? So we have this whole thing about making sex, procreation beautiful, a beautiful thing, right? A union between 2 people, and then we have to have people that just come along and fucking ruin it for everyone.
Yeah. I think the internet did that for me, very young. But there you go.
Because used to be able, you could kind of, you could get away with a shorter time than is advertised in porn videos. But now, you got the P. Diddy standard.
I guess, man. I don't know how we got down this road. So maybe we should just.
You sound like you want to turn around and get off it real quick.
I think I do.
Where is the freeway?
Yeah, am I blushing a little already? I'm Scott Hess, tax and business consultant.
I'm John Barton, small business owner. Remember the tortoise and the hare? Slow and steady wins the race.
We started Turtlesmith to help people start small businesses, providing information and resources to small business owners and entrepreneurs.
Build a solid foundation and forge your dreams.
Let's just jump right into it. How about that? So this week we're talking about our second to last step in phase 2, which is choose a business structure. And there's a real reason why this is so late in the steps. Oftentimes, people will rush out to form a business. They'll rush out to form an LLC. They'll get all their paperwork in line, and then they just don't do anything.
I think you need to explain what a business structure means in non-CPA talk.
So a business structure is forming your company, either an LLC, a corporation, getting your federal ID, operating agreement, all the ducks in a row to actually be a proper business within the state. And so we're going to go through kind of all the rules and regulations and what we recommend at Turtlesmith that you should do. And so a business structure would be like an LLC. But like I said, we kind of have this so late because so many people will rush to form their business. They'll rush to get an LLC. They'll rush to get their federal ID. It's like the first thing they do. And then by the time they get through all the planning step, they don't end up using it. And it's just a waste of money and time and energy.
And obligation, because there's a certain way to close one, right?
Yeah. Like if you legally, don't do the proper one, they'll be after you. I had a client who was kind of an LLC junkie. He came to my office, and he had like 30 LLCs, 2 of which he actually used. So we had to go through the process of filing old tax returns and shutting companies down and closing bank accounts, and it was just a mess. So it is in my opinion that you wait until this step. Once you've gone through all the planning, you've learned everything that there is to know, and you're getting ready to open, that you should actually go out and form your business structure. And it doesn't take that long to get your paperwork. It's really quick. You can just file with the Secretary of State. You apply for a federal ID and get your operating agreement. The only real timing structure that you got to wait for is if you're filing for any licenses or permits, you do need to have that paperwork in hand before you file for your license and permits.
So now, some people might say, what is a Delaware corporation or something like that? Because you got all these LLC
Yep.
outlets online where you can go and create one.
Mm-hmm.
I did that, and then a little bit later down the road, I kind of had a little bit of trouble getting information out of them. But what is the rules on that as far as filing in the state that you're in or doing it somewhere else?
So there is some benefit sometimes to file in a different state, but I highly recommend that you only do that under the care of like a tax professional or a lawyer. If you're doing a small business on your own, particularly if it's your first business or you're just getting started, there is no reason to file a Delaware LLC or a Delaware corporation. The big one today is Wyoming. Everybody wants to go out to Wyoming. The reasoning behind people filing in those states is they have favorable tax laws. And so an LLC doesn't have anything to do with your taxes per se. An LLC is a legal structure, as is a corporation. Now those will determine kind of how you're taxed, but the more important part for the structure is the legal status. So if you're an LLC, it's called a limited liability company. Those can be formed in other states, but the big problem with that is if you get sued or you have a problem or you have to go to court for any reason, you have to go to that state. Mm-hmm. So if I file an LLC, in Wyoming, and I have a legal matter that needs to be taken care of, I have to go find a lawyer in Wyoming, and then I have to go to Wyoming to deal with the court case. Not that Wyoming's a bad place to spend a couple weeks, but it's just an unnecessary cost. So I'm of the opinion, just file it in the state that you're going to be operating in. You're going to have to pay taxes in the state that you operate in anyway, and it just creates an unnecessary headache to go out of state. So we're going to talk about kind of the different structures real quick. An LLC is the most common for small businesses. It's a great one to be limited liability, and the reason that they call it limited liability is that it protects your personal assets against debts and liabilities against your company. So if you get sued, your LLC gets sued for some kind of issue, they can't go after your personal assets usually. They're not able to sue you personally. Now, if there's gross misconduct or negligence on your part, they may be able to go out. Or if they do a thing called piercing the corporate veil, which we'll go over later. But an LLC does offer kind of a thin layer of protection, and it's a good idea for small business owners.
That started to sound dangerously close to a P. Diddy reference.
No. No.
Piercing the corporate veil?
Get that off your mind, man. It's a legal term. A legal term.
He's learning them legal terms too.
Yeah, I bet he is right now. So it's important to note too that an LLC can be one member or multiple members, and that determines kind of what tax form you end up filing. So if you're a single member LLC, just one owner, and you form an LLC, you're just considered a sole proprietorship, which I'm sure you might have heard before. And the IRS considers that a disregarded entity, so they don't differentiate tax-wise between you and the business. If there are multiple people, then it becomes a partnership.
Okay, so now you said sole proprietorship, mm-hmm. right? I think that's the one most people are familiar with.
Correct.
What is the major difference there? So for tax purposes, if I understood you correctly, if you're a single owner LLC, so the C in LLC is corporation, right? Which generally...
Well, it's company.
Company.
Yeah,
oh, is it company? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. Which can have multiple partners, right? Mm-hmm. Which would require then the splitting up of the profits or whatever for tax purposes and all that. As much as I understand that, but what is So if they consider it the same for tax purposes, then is the liability protection pretty much the only reason then to have an LLC?
Correct. Yeah. And again, there's a difference between taxes and legal structure. And I think that's where people get hung up sometimes. They think a LLC is for tax purposes, and really it's your legal structure.
So what is the liability part there? So when you say, I think it's up to 50,000, right, or something like that.
No. So it's the limited liability is just that. It limits your liability.
Liability for what?
For debts and liabilities against your personal assets. That's all it is. So if your company, JB Cases, gets sued, they can't come after your house. They can't come after your personal car. They can't come after your TV in your house.
Is there an amount, though, attached to that in some way?
No.
Okay. For some reason I had the number 50,000 in my mind.
No, I don't know where you got that.
Yeah.
So.
I don't either.
So if you're a single member LLC, like I was saying, you're considered a sole proprietor, and it's considered a disregarded entity with the IRS. That has no effect on your legal structure. If you are a multi-member LLC, you get you file a tax form 1065, which is a partnership return, and you get a K1, which shows your income or losses and self-employment tax and stuff like that on there. So basically, a K1 is like a W-2 for a business. If you work for a job, you get a W-2. It shows all your wages and how much was withheld. At the end of the year, the business, when it files its tax returns, provides its owners or members with a K1, and that's used on your personal tax return. And so an LLC, when it's a single member or a partnership, is considered a pass-through entity, so all of the taxes are just sort of passed through down to the personal owner, and they file it on their tax return. It is important to note that you don't have to form an LLC for taxes. That's, again, it's a legal structure, not taxes. You can have a partnership that files the same tax form, and it's not an LLC. It's just a partnership. The next one we're going to talk about a little bit is LLPs or PLLCs. So these are real specific. They're called limited liability partnerships or professional limited liability companies. And these are really only used for professionals. So if you're forming like a law firm or an architect firm or accounting, engineers, things like that, doctors, they all use these when they form their little practices. And typically you have to have a license. Every state's a little different, so look into it. And some don't even have LLPs, some have PLLCs, some have both. But the big advantage of that is if one of the members of this group is sued because of malpractice or negligence or something, it protects the other four or the other groups. So if you have 5 and one of the members is sued, the other 4 are safe from being sued for malpractice. So that's really the way to the reason to put that together is if you have like a professional license, it protects your professional license and still offers the benefits of a regular LLC.
It protects you from your partners.
It does, yeah. But it's only for professional services.
Right.
So only if you have like a license and are offering professional, things. The next kind of thing we're going to talk about is corporations. So there's 2 types of corporations, an S corporation and a C corporation. An S corporation gets really complicated, but a lot of times an LLC will take what's called an S corp election. So they stay an LLC legally, but they take an S corp election to be taxed as an S corp. That is what your company does, JB Cases, and it's what my company does. But it's real tricky. You got to have some type of tax professional guiding you, because when you set that up, you become an officer of the company, and as an officer, you have to receive a reasonable salary. And what that reasonable salary is difficult to determine. It depends on your industry, and it depends on how much money you're making.
But a tax professional would have a chart or something? Or?
Well, they'll just know.
Okay.
Usually we do it as a percentage, unless you're making too little, and then it becomes like a regular salary. And then we look at the industry standard, because the IRS...
It's never comforting, Scott, when you're telling business guys things like voodoo magic is how we determine the cost of something.
It's not voodoo magic. It's just not like a fixed amount. So, and I hate to say a fixed amount because I don't want somebody to go out there. But a good example is like If you are own a retail store and that retail store has 200,000 in net income, we would maybe say 75,000 is a reasonable salary. So you would get 75,000 as salary, and the other 125,000 would be distributed to you.
Yeah, but is that more based on feeling, or is there actually some sort of a guidance or a charter?
So the guidance from the IRS is pretty vague, and it says that a reasonable salary is considered the value that would ordinarily be paid for like services by like enterprises under like circumstances. And
has anybody ever had a reasonable audit from the?
So we have had many audits. In fact,
Yeah.
clients have come and to me with S corps, and they either didn't pay themselves the salary or they didn't pay themselves enough salary, and the IRS will come in and say, you didn't charge enough, we're going to go back and make you do more. And the reason is because an S corp distributions are not subject to self-employment tax, and self-employment tax is like 15.3% right off the top. So if you have an LLC that's a single member or a partnership, you get that K1, whatever your earnings are, you have to pay 15%.
So it's kind of like they want to sort of have some kind of ratio that makes sense, like kind of like when you get tips, right? And you they're not going to accept if you declare that you made less than 15% in tips, for example,
Right.
or I think it's like 12% or something like that. But it's like you're going to get, and if you do that too often, then they're going to think to themselves, there's probably something not right here. And they can assess more. But I think that if I remember right, that's kind of how it was with tips. So basically, they're wanting people to have as much gross income as minimally, reasonable.
Yeah.
And then go from there to get their income tax in lieu of the what is it, the employment taxes.
Self-employment taxes.
Self-employment
yeah.
tax.
Yeah, and self-employment tax is basically just your FICA taxes. So like when you get a W-2, they take Social Security and Medicare out of your check. The employer or the company that you're working for has to match that amount. And so total, what they withheld and what they match equals 15%.
So when that money goes into the Treasury that's not being paid for FICA,
No, the self-employment tax does go to FICA. So
No, but you said if it's an S corp, then there's no self-employment tax. Am I right?
Well, correct. Your earnings on the S corporation are not subject to self-employment tax, but then you do have to receive that reasonable salary, which does have FICA taxes associated with it.
Oh,
So
okay.
so you
get
just
it now.
receive salary. Basically, the IRS just wants their money,
Right.
regardless.
And you're still paying self-employment tax.
You're still paying
either
a little,
way.
but it is a great tax saving. So in that example I gave before, of 200,000 and then 75,000, that 125,000 of distributions not subject to self-employment tax, that saves you about $19,000 in taxes.
I got it now. So
And-
it's not treated as income necessarily for the purpose of taxes.
It's treated as ordinary income, so your ordinary regular tax rate accounts to it, but not self-employment. Again, this gets super complicated.
Sounds like it.
And you really need to have a tax professional if you're going to be doing the S corp election. I usually recommend to my clients that they should come to me and we can start discussing this as an option when they're making around 80 to 100,000 in net income. That's when it starts to kind of make sense for the S corp election.
So for a typical business, so an average business, would you say, what kind of gross income does 80,000 represent?
So that really, again, depends on the industry, but probably in the neighborhood of 500,000. If you have a gross profit margin of 20% in most industries, you're doing pretty good. My company, like I'm a service industry, it's much higher. It's like 50%. So maybe I took my S corp election when my gross revenue was 300,000. And so other people might do differently. It just depends on the industry. I feel like a lot of times you're looking for specific answers when it comes to taxes, and I'm never going to be able to give one. You have to look at this you have to look at every industry, you have to look at each taxpayer and each business, and it's all different.
I know the IRS says there's a lot of factors to consider.
Well, and there's a lot of little gray area, like
Right.
what the heck does a reasonable salary mean? I mean, it's nonsense, their answer, and they leave it like that because if they want you to pay too much. But then if you pay too little, they'll come and audit you and you'll be in trouble.
So one of the owners here in town, he had a different pool room, and apparently the Able Commission came back and said that in their opinion, he should have sold $30,000 more worth of liquor.
Yeah.
in a 6-month period, and they were going to charge him as if he had sold that much and then charge him the applicable tax.
Right.
And I was like, how can they possibly do that?
So it's this exact kind of thing that they're saying, like circumstances. So they take the average of other pool rooms, their size, and they average out the sales of each of them. And then if you're below that, they want to come look at you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm, not to get political or anything, but that tilts me a little bit more towards the government stay out of my life conservative side.
I'm with you a little on that. But the thing that they're looking for is that if they think he was down by 30%, they think he's selling that out the back door.
No, I understand that, and if they have evidence of that, that's fine. But if there's no evidence of it, then just assessing it seems excessive.
Well, it's the same thing that the IRS does, and really all government agencies. They'll look at these percentages because it's just too big. The world is way too big and too many businesses to really try to focus and investigate each one. So they go through and look at these percentages, and if you're off by like a little bit or you're not reasonable compared to industries, then they'll come out at you.
Yeah. Well.
Sorry, my phone's ringing. Shut up.
So basically, if you're going to play the odds, but it's probably better to play by the rules so that you don't ever have to worry about it.
Well, and again, a tax professional can really help you make sure that you got everything in line. So that's an S-Corp election. You can also just be an S-Corp. The ticket to an S-Corp is you can issue preferred stock or one kind of stock to your employees or to other members. And it's really, S-Corporation tax-wise is really good. And the LLC with the election kind of gives you the best of both worlds. Your LLC structure with being taxed as an S-Corp, it's about the best for small business owners right now.
Now, I've often wondered something. So nonprofits obviously is not supposed to make a profit, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It says it in the title. But are there people who you would say are basically running a business as a nonprofit?
Not in sense of a nonprofit, but there are people who run businesses at a loss intentionally, and then they make money elsewhere. So, like for example, our oil company that I'm a little part of, Hess Oil, we actually lose money every year on the operations side. We lose money for the pumpers and the health insurance and the employees and everything. That company loses money, but we all make money as royalty interest holders in the oil wells. So we get paid and everybody has to put a little bit of money in to keep the operations going.
So wait a minute. I seem to remember when I was a kid that there was a Hess Oil with a dinosaur.
Yeah, that was Sinclair.
Sinclair,
the
okay.
But there is a very large Amarada Hess, and they have Hess gas stations and stuff. Sometimes when traveling, I pretend that I own those, but I really.
Okay,
I
was just wondering. I was like, wait a minute. Am I sitting here with a guy that's slumming as an accountant?
No. Ours is a very small company. We only do like vertical wells out in western Kansas, and it's just an independent one. But my great grandpa named it way back in the day, so I think we've either just flown under the radar or they don't care.
I think it's cool that there's still kind of like independent companies like that out there, drilling wells.
A lot of them get bought up, and we almost lost our company I think it was like when the oil crashed in like the early 90s or something. Everything was real bad. Oil got down to like $9, but anyway, that's the story for another time. S corporation. So, and then the next one is C corp. So C corp is the classic corporation. Lots of companies, big companies are corporations. I really, really strongly advise not to be a corporation unless you're under the guidance of a tax professional. The taxes are wild. There's a lot more regulations and specific things you have to do with the C corporation. You should not try to do it yourself. And really, there's no tax advantage. Most oftentimes you're actually taxed twice. The company itself has to pay income taxes, while an S corp and a partnership and a regular LLC and all that, those are pass-through entities. C corporations have to pay their own taxes, and then the dividends and payments that they give to their shareholders, they have to pay taxes on too, so you get double taxed. It's a real mess for small businesses.
Why are there
So
C corporations?
The advantage of corporations is the legal structure. It's a completely separate entity. It lives on its own. It's entirely its own entity, completely separate, and you're a shareholder of it if you own stock. The other kind of big advantage of a C Corp is you can issue multiple kinds of stocks. So you can have common stock or preferred stock, and it helps give employees some ownership into companies if you want to do that. It also helps when you go public. And
is this the kind of the idea that corporations are people?
Yeah. Corporations are kind of their own thing. They're like its own person out there. And it's completely separate from the
So
individuals.
is that to kind of say that the corporation, maybe I'm a little bit off track here, but the corporation becomes its own kind of entity in the sense that at that point no one person controls it? Or
well, that's sort of when you go public and you get like a board and have lots of shareholders.
So you can be a corporation without still be privately held.
There are a lot of people who have small corporations. In fact, back in the day, there was a thing about everybody needed to incorporate. Put your house in a corporation, put your cars in corporations.
Yeah, what about that? Clear that up for us real quick.
It's just a long time ago, before my time of being an accountant, and so I don't know all the exact ins and outs. There were some advantages. Right now, the big advantage is LLCs taking the S Corp election. Back then, it was really good to incorporate. The tax rates were very low. It was very favorable for the individual to incorporate themselves, basically, and have all their assets and income run through a corporation. Right now, it is not as favorable. So that's basically it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We won't get into trusts and sovereign citizenry and all that.
No, this is just specifically for
Continue,
for
please.
businesses.
I'm getting you off track.
So, the next thing you had mentioned before is nonprofits. So, a nonprofit, we don't really talk too much about not-for-profit companies since we're kind of a small business company, but it is good to know the 501c3 is a designation that you can get on your Secretary of State website. You apply for nonprofit company, and then you have to file what's called a Form 1023, and you can file it on this website, pay.gov, and you apply for not-for-profit status, and then once you get that approved, you're a nonprofit.
So the reason I asked earlier about running a business as a nonprofit, for example, was my thought is there may be somebody who, maybe they want to do some good in some way, and they set up a nonprofit, but they also pay themselves a salary out of what comes in. So in a sense, they've set this thing up that is going to then pay themselves for their living expenses.
Yeah, so you can receive a salary if you set up a nonprofit, absolutely. It has to be reasonable. You can't get crazy with it, otherwise that you might lose your status. But receiving, a regular salary, that's
right.
Similar.
So the other aspects of that I wanted to get to was, in every other way, though, right, they would be similar to running a business, right? They would be procuring stuff. They'd be potentially selling stuff, maybe merch or whatever. Yeah,
you can do all of that stuff. Mostly, though, they run off donations or grants from the government. Is how a nonprofit really functions. You can get write grants to the government. You can get funded and then take in donations, and that's the difference. So when you receive income, it's actually considered a donation from the people. Even if you sell stuff, sometimes you can consider that a donation, and you send the customers or whoever donated a letter at the end of the year saying how much they donated to the 501c3, and then they can deduct that from their taxes.
Now, what happens, I know we're getting a little off track still, but what happens when a nonprofit makes a profit? In other words, they just have more money than they spent.
So the only real big difference there is that a typical company, if it has excess gains, can distribute those to the owner. A nonprofit can't distribute those to their owner. Now, they might be able to pay like some bonus checks at the end of the year, but you can't just write a check as, here's the profit we made.
Well, no, yeah, but what does it just roll over to the next year and just be part of their continual operating budget?
They need to spend it for something else, or maybe they're, a lot of times nonprofits will save a bunch of money for a larger goal. So yeah, every year they might make a little bit of money and they just keep saving it.
Okay.
So, and it just all has to be accounted for where the money goes on when you do your financials.
As long as the ledgers match up.
There you go. One thing I mentioned before that I want to talk about is what's called piercing the corporate veil. Have you ever heard that term before?
I have heard it before, just a little while ago.
Yeah. Piercing the corporate veil is when you intermingle your personal expenses with your business expenses, and you're in a lawsuit of some kind. will use that as an excuse to say your LLC status is not valid. You are intermingling your expenses, therefore there's no difference between you and your business, and they can come after your personal assets. So it is absolutely vital as a company that you separate your finances. You have to have a separate business bank account. Do not pay your personal mortgage or car payment or utility bills or food or whatever for personal use out of your business account. This podcast is brought to you by S&H Business Services. We are serving the OKC and greater Oklahoma area. We offer tax preparation, accounting, bookkeeping, and payroll services for small businesses and individuals. You can find us at shbusinessservices.com. Again, that's S&H Business Services, found at shbusinessservices.com.
So,
in this episode or this segment, we're going to be talking about really your most valuable asset, which is time. Time is the most valuable asset of everybody, but especially small business owners. And it seems like a lot of people it doesn't seem like a lot of people trade their time for money, which is what a basic job is. And as a business owner, you're just trying to find enough time in the day usually to get everything done.
yeah, I mean, that's again, we've talked about this before. Business owners wear many hats.
Mm-hmm.
I've spoken before about the story of the young guy who took all the custom orders for $250 a case and then went out and spent all of his money on leather and tools, and then found that he didn't have any money left to pay himself for the time it was going to take to make those cases.
Yeah, and budgeting for your time is just vitally important. You got to have the money to pay yourself at least a reasonable wage. And oftentimes a lot of business owners who have business plans, they'll come in here with a great idea and they'll do kind of all the financials, and then by the time they get done, they're going to be making like $12 an hour. It's what we call buying yourself a job, which is about the worst thing that business owners can do.
There's another adage that kind of goes along with that too, is if you can't afford to pay yourself, how will you ever be able to hire someone?
Right. And that is the ticket to buying back your time, basically, or how to keep more time for yourself is delegation. You've got to delegate tasks, and you got to do it as quick as possible. Otherwise, you won't have time to focus on other things and the more important things.
Right. And that's something that I've had to learn. There can be over dependence on people, and allowing them to do things unsupervised that end up costing you more time.
Yeah.
So, you got to find that balance of properly training them, properly motivating them, and then letting them fly, once you're sure that they know what they're doing. And if you find an especially good person to be around, then they're going to not only are they going to help you with your time, but they're going to help you with your attitude. They're going to help you with, your peace of mind, just on so many levels, So there's that. There's looking into services that are available.
My service is a good example of that.
Perfect example.
So my entire kind of pitch to all of my clients is that I'm going to save you a lot of time. So the things that we do, I can do very quickly because I do the same thing kind of every day, with financials and taxes and payroll, and they don't do that every day. And so what takes me an hour or two to do might take them 8 or 9 hours. So we save them a lot of time.
Right, or never, because I'm the kind of person that puts things off.
Yeah.
So it's much easier for me to call you up and say, hey, I need this, and you get it done, even if it costs me a little bit. But as opposed to me saying every day I need to get that done and then never doing it.
Right. So yeah, services like mine are great. There's also that book that you'd mentioned a couple times, The 4-Hour Workweek, where he kind of he recommends outsourcing as much as possible, which I can neither recommend nor say it's a bad idea because I've never really done too much outsourcing. I know a lot of people outsource their financials and QuickBooks to the Philippines or to India, and they usually have decent results sometimes. It's a little mixed. Sometimes they find a bad person, but that's a great thought find somebody out there to kind of
I'd be
outsource?
personally worried about that, though. Like somebody halfway around the world who I barely know, I'm giving them all my financials.
Well, and so that's a problem. You give them like some of your financials, like they have access
God,
to
that's
like your
even more
bank
time
statements.
that I got to spend figuring out what do I show them, what do I don't, how do I do that?
Yeah, I'm with
Not
you.
me. I'd be like, they'd have all my bank accounts, all my passwords, everything. I'd be like, I trust you, Lamar.
Yeah.
I'd be like,
Well, there is a deal on QuickBooks Online where you can like link your bank accounts and the transactions go in there, and then all they have to do is like review them, but they don't have access to your bank account. But again, it can become a headache. So I would caution people to outsource, overseas, or at least do so, cautiously. Try not to, don't just jump into it and give them all your bank accounts like you would do.
well, yeah, I'm a little oversharing sometimes, my wife says.
Well, and then I've been hearing about like IT guys and people just taking their whole dang jobs and outsourcing them, especially with the
that's
work
the
from
thing.
home culture.
That's a thing. They've actually got they've got IT guys that actually work for 2 or 3 companies and then outsource all the jobs that they got from those companies.
Yeah, and
So
just
they're
don't
making
work.
American wages, and their output is actually there, right? So I don't see what the actual problem is with that, except the fact that one person is basically taking 3 jobs.
Yeah, I don't know.
But-
what are your feelings on that? I mean, is that just like a good for them hustle, or is that kind of like?
Well, I mean, my feelings are mixed on it, because on one hand, I admire the hustle, and I say, if I'm getting what I need, what I've contracted to get, right, and it's happening and working, and I'm paying money for that work, why do I care? Right? Now, is there a chance, for example, that something breaks down in the other 2 ventures or whatever that the guy's got going on that then affects me?
Mm-hmm.
That would be a concern of mine. And then that's where I might say, I really don't want you focusing on these other 2 things that are similar. Also, I would be concerned maybe about leakage if it was in similar industries, and ideas that person might be privy to that find their way somehow through conversation in these other companies.
Well, see, I've heard about guys who are doing like 3 or 4 jobs, but they half-ass all of them, and they know that they're going to get fired, but they stack them in such a way that when they lose their first job, they already got another one lined up, and so they keep going
what, dude?
and going.
That sounds like the whitest fucking privilege I've ever heard.
Right? It's just it's all horrible.
Like other people are just like struggling to keep one job,
Right.
or they're working like 3 full-time jobs. They're pulling like triple shifts at Denny's and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got white dudes sitting in chairs that are just, I don't want to say white dudes, tech dudes also, whatever, but, I'm imagining that it's mostly white dudes, are sitting in their chairs stacking jobs that they're all doing half-ass.
Yeah.
It's like...
Yeah. Then they know they're going to get fired, but they don't care because they've got 2 other ones going, and then they'll get another one as soon as they lose that one. I don't know. As a person, I kind of admire the hustle. I think it's if you can get away with it, make as much money as you can. But as a business owner,
Yeah, that sounds
I'm
pretty much like the prescription for bank robbery, too.
right. But as a business owner, I'm a little bit insulted. I'm like, do your job correctly.
Also, that is a good way to buy time, robbing banks.
Okay. Well, we do not recommend people robbing banks. But
20 to life.
outsourcing, like we talked about, it's a decent way to buy some time back, but you have to kind of be optimistic. The best way, though, is if you can delegate and hire people in-house. I think they work better.
So,
Somebody you have control over, those kind of things.
well, I've talked about 2-second lean a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I find that to be an excellent way to buy time.
Yeah.
If you follow it, if you do it.
Yeah, efficiency is
Paul
definitely
Akers is the author of 2-Second Lean.
Mm-hmm.
You can find his audiobooks for free on YouTube. Remember what I told you earlier in the other segment was whatever you can get for free in this business, take it.
Get after it.
Okay, as long as it doesn't cost you anything, because sometimes the free shit is what costs you the most.
Right.
But you'll learn to evaluate that. But anyway, 2-Second Lean is about looking at all the processes that you do, the way that you do them, and trying to shave time, by making them more efficient. So, instead of reaching 3 feet for something, you reach a foot for something and things like that. Or learning how to inventory properly so that you, when you get down in stock, you have an actual physical marker that tells you it's time to reorder.
Well, that's a great tip.
Yeah, that's called in that system. It's called Kanban. So
Yeah.
2 second lean is basically lean, kind of efficient behaviors in your business, in your processes. It comes from the Toyota production system. And so the word Kanban is literally like restock, like this is where you restock. So it tells
I do
you.
that for our checks. We have checks for clients that we send out for their businesses, and I order those from that can go through the printer. And so I always void the top one and then stick it about 3/4 of the way down, so I know when to reorder.
That's exactly what it is. So
Yeah.
you're following that without even knowing it. So that's pretty good.
There you go.
But efficiency, is a place where people don't realize how much time they lose. We talked earlier about like DIY stuff where you're making 20 trips to the store instead of sitting down and just taking the time to plan out exactly everything as it is.
Yep.
Tesla famously, not the car company, but Nikola Tesla famously said that he would spend a lot of time thinking everything out. He says, I knew what I invented would work because I had already thought of all the ways to do it, before I finally committed it to paper and then built it.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who can conceive of things like that, and there are a lot of people who could do it, but they don't, or they don't think about it, and they waste a lot of time. Going back to your earlier comment about guys half-assing their jobs, right? Well, if you're a business owner, your time becomes even more valuable. So
yeah, exponentially.
So you don't have the time to half-ass shit because you're already moving on to the next customer's needs or whatever it is, and there's one maxim there that really plays into that, and it's like if you don't have the time to do it right the first time, how are you going to find the time to do it right the second time?
Yeah.
And so on, right? So the more efficient that you can make it with your processes, that's a really good way to buy time.
And I don't think we talked about that enough during our concept development back in phase 1 when we were discussing building that training manual, is really looking for those inefficiencies. So that would be a good time during your planning process to go through and really act out all of those steps that you're going to take and see where you can cut those inefficiencies.
So, the acting out is also something we didn't talk about that much, the role playing and the imagining and stuff like that. And that's, it turns out that that's actually quite important.
Yeah. Well, there's that scene in the movie The Founder where they were doing the McDonald's system, and he's got the kitchen chalked out on a tennis court, and he's got all the employees out there, and they're going through a little role play of like how it's going to work and everything. And that's how he designed how the kitchen was going to look.
And you know what? That is exactly the lean process.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. You think it out, then it's never, ever going to stay the way that you thought it the first way.
Mm-hmm.
But just the act of trying to suss it out and trying to figure it out is going to start you down the good path of continually improving those processes.
Yeah. Yeah. And, another thing that I think you and I disagree on, I like to set a value for like my time, and I'm not going to say what it is, but I have like a number in my head that I say, if this costs me less to hire somebody to do, I'm just going to hire somebody. So I hire people to do all the little stuff in my life that I don't have time or can't do. So like I always call the guy to fix things. If I'm getting a remodel done, I have them do all of the work. You like to do a little bit yourself and get a little tackle in there.
I think it's the tinkerer in me.
Yeah.
It's I've always been the kind of person that looks around and I just am just somewhat unusually attracted to flaws. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why I've been married twice before. But
fair enough.
But I just look at things, right, and I'm like, that could be better.
Yeah.
Somebody could have put a little bit more thought into that, and then and if they'd have just simply changed it this way, then it would be so much better.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot of people that go through that in the world, right? And there's people that are even more obsessive about it than I am. Hell, there's a story I saw on YouTube or something a while back about a guy who decided to fix a freeway sign that was confusing. Mm-hmm. He literally like hired or made himself a van or something that looked like an official state van.
Oh, he just went out and
He
fixed it
had
himself.
he had the whole gear on exactly like a state employee, and he just went out there and he created this whole freeway sign that was exactly like the freeway signs, but he changed what was a confusing set of symbols, in the way they have it up there. And by the way, Oklahoma City, I think that 5-year-olds who dump their plate of spaghetti on the floor are better traffic designers than you. Sorry, that was a public service announcement.
You think Oklahoma City's that bad?
It's terrible.
I love it. I think it's fine.
Terrible, and it's getting terribler. And I just made up that word. And if there's a worse word than terribler, then whatever it is, that's what Oklahoma City's highway traffic system is.
I think you need to spend some more time on the East Coast where it's a real nightmare.
Okay, I don't care about that. I live here. I'm driving here, right?
Yeah.
So, I actually, I could probably just make a blog of that, just a vlog of like going around, like filming the way that the intersections work here and all that, all the interchanges. And, I'll probably get internet famous from that.
Well, there you go.
I'm probably not going to get bad Barbie money, but I'll be happy with like $50 instead of $50 million.
Yeah.
So anyway, where were we at there? We
He changed the whole sign. Yeah.
He changed the whole sign so that like I would drive by that a million times, and every time I look at it, I would go, that could be better. Somebody should do something about that, and that was the guy. He's the somebody that did something about it.
Well, when you are a business owner, I think it's important to identify where you're most valuable. So where your time is most valuably spent. For me in my business, there's 200 tasks a day that have to get done, and only about 5 of them really bring in more business and help grow our company and are focused to the kind of big picture. All the other stuff is sort of minutia. So I've tried to hire to get as many of that minutia taken care of as I can so that I can focus on the big picture stuff. And so when you're running your business, there's certain things that you're never going to be able to delegate. You have to do yourself, but you should try to buy back all that time by hiring other people or figuring out processes or doing something so that you can focus on the more important things.
I actually have come around to agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Because having those people in my life, that I can delegate these things to, and like, even you as my accountant, right? I can call you up and say, hey, I need this license or I need that or whatever, and just not think about it anymore. And, at some point you'll send me a text or something and you'll say, hey, it's done, or come sign this or whatever. Then you'll wait 3 weeks for me to actually get around to come signing it, but at least it's done.
That's usually what happens. Yeah.
But
well, I'm not very good at staying in my lane either. You'll find a lot of accountants who'll just do like taxes or financials or just their thing. I've kind of drifted out all over the place during the course of my business because early on I had to make money, so I would just do anything, and now I can do a lot of goofy stuff licensing and all that stuff.
I think that what you do though is a natural fit.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it works for me. Yeah.
Because I remember, like, I went to an accountant in Midwest City, and that guy he's so nice, right? And he would sit down and he'd basically do, a 30-minute sermon on how to use QuickBooks, which, my eyes would glaze over because I don't want to use QuickBooks.
Yeah. But see, that's what he wanted because his most valuable time was spent doing taxes, not doing the bookkeeping.
Right. But my point is that as nice as he was, right, I was never inclined to actually, use him, and I actually stopped using him to my detriment because obviously the taxes didn't get filed and I got fined, But when I, started with you, and it quickly became apparent that you would handle, a lot of these ancillary things, then I don't believe that I even cared too much about what you were charging at that point. So, because I know that these important things that need to be taken care of, right, that are going to cost way more time to fix, are, like one of the least favorite places in my life that I like to go is the IRS office.
Yeah.
And not necessarily because I hate paying taxes, right? It's just that cumbersome.
Yep.
It's just an awful, it's almost worse than the driver's license office.
Yeah.
Well,
as a tax accountant, it's my least favorite place to be too. So.
Yeah, so and you're the most cheerful accountant I know.
Well, thank you. I try to be.
But I mean, it's just like, yes, I agree with you now. It's better to just hire. And you know what's funny about that is Stephen Covey in the Seven Habits of Highly Successful People. One of the tenets that he had in there was he said, hire for your weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another way of saying buy time or delegate. Is basically, it's the business owner's tendency, I think, to feel like that no one can do it better than them. If you want it done right, do it yourself.
Some of that is true, though, because like we've talked about before, no matter who you hire or if you get employees or you have outside contractors, nobody cares as much about your business as you do. So you should be taking care of the important things, but the little stuff, that somebody else can handle or that can save you some time is really good to delegate.
But it's also important, all right, and I want to mention this, and this is actually for my personal life right now, because I just had the bathroom remodeled.
Yeah, which I thought you'd done way too much work on.
Well, possibly, but here's the thing with that. It is super important to be less nice about things and accepting, and more critical when things are important to you.
Yeah.
Because being nice and overlooking, mistakes and things like that and things that don't sit right with you, that's going to cause you more anguish. It's going to cause you more time worrying about it. It's going to cause you more time obsessing with it. And the personal example I want to give with that is I just had the bathroom remodeled. People get a little inset for all their shampoo and everything. And the frame around it, right, is everything is swimming in grout. So it's not a nice looking frame.
Yeah.
And when they were doing it, I was just, this looks great, and just kind of trying to keep everybody happy. When what I should have been doing is saying, no, I want this, level here. I should have been a little bit more of an asshole because I got to live with that. And every time I look at it, it robs me of 15 seconds of, being happy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could even go that abstract as to say, like, how do you buy yourself some time? You buy yourself some time by insisting that things are done right the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a good point.
And therefore, you and the person who's doing the work for you are both saving time because you're not going to have to revisit that down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I really find helpful is making lists. I'm a big list guy. I get that dopamine hit when I cross something off. And I learned from actually Wesley, who was on here. We have an interview with him in a previous episode. He was real big on, he makes like 3 things a day that he's going to knock out, and that do or die, he's getting them done. Doesn't matter if it takes him an hour, or if it takes him all day. He's just getting those done. And that seems to help delegate his time a little bit more in a laser focus.
I hate those people.
But they get shit done, man.
They do get shit done. That's the thing, man. Like I remember somebody said to me at one point, or maybe I read it somewhere or something, that the lists are great, but don't even do them electronically. Like go get the little dollar store notepad like you're a detective,
Yep.
and then write it down on that day, and then you just, you cross it out, and like you said, you get that dopamine hit.
I do. I get that dopamine
and
hit
it takes
every time.
about 21 days to break in a new habit.
Yeah.
I never make it that far, man. I lose my little book, I leave it off to the side somewhere. If you look to act like at the last 20 years of my life, you would find it littered with lots of little notebooks and things like that, and journals and things that I swore I was going to start.
Yeah.
And you'll find some wonderful rambling prose, that seems like it should win some sort of literary award if it were continued.
Well, see, I don't know if you suffer from this, but I know some people do. If I don't make a list, I start thinking about all of the things that I have to do, and I get paralyzed because I'm like, how am I going to accomplish all this crap that I have to do? And then I just go watch YouTube shorts or sit on the couch because I don't want to even bother with it.
That's another thing. Yeah, you get paralyzed by when you start making a list, and that list includes the last 200 things you've neglected.
Yeah.
Then it gets pretty daunting.
Mm-hmm. This podcast is brought to you by S&H Business Services. We are serving the OKC and greater Oklahoma area. We offer tax preparation, accounting, bookkeeping, and payroll services for small businesses and individuals. You can find us at shbusinessservices.com. Again, that's S&H Business Services, found at shbusinessservices.com. So,
Okay.
well, let's move on to our last one. You told me a great fuck up this week.
Oh my God!
You had a good
You
one.
had to remind me about that.
You had a
right
good
now.
one.
Oh Jesus! Oh goodness! So I don't honestly know if this is a common thing with businesses. I can, however, I do. It reminds me I do have a bigger business story to that goes along with it. So what happened is I had a pool cue repair lathe. It's just a piece of equipment. We can do tips, we can do ferrules. We can do work on my customers' cues at my pool room,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I bought this lathe and I want to get to start using it and everything. And then one of my customers asked me, if they could buy it. They wanted to do the cue work, right? But he wanted to know if he could buy the lathe. So we ended up making a deal, and I traded for a pool cue, and the guy's been there about a year and a half or so, and everything's been great. But then we had a little tiff, a little disagreement about how to handle a situation, and he packed up and left. But since the lathe was no longer mine, right, then that means the cue repair left with him. Because I could do the cue repair, my manager can do the cue repair, right? So we were able to do those basic jobs.
Yeah.
But now I can't do it. So the fuck up on my end was to sell what I consider to be a vital piece of my equipment to the person running the equipment, and putting myself at risk where the person doing the primary person doing the work plus the equipment is gone. So now I can't even offer the basic service.
Oh no.
So yeah, that was my
So
thing.
now you gotta go buy a new lathe.
Now I got to go buy a new lathe, right, and spend that money. And I had a pretty good setup, for what I paid for it the last time. You remember Rocky? I bought his setup.
Yeah.
And so now to replace all that, is going to cost me more than $1,800.
Oh no.
And of course, there's going to be the whole deal with people saying, well, I only want that guy to do my work, the guy that was previously there, instead of you guys or whatever. And so we have to build people's trust to make sure that they understand that we can do the work. We can do a good job.
So looking in hindsight, I mean, obviously you probably wouldn't have sold the lathe, but would you have maybe just, if you had a better agreement or something on paper that said how that deal was going to operate, it might have worked out better?
Absolutely. That would have been the way to go, and that goes back to what, me being too trusting and too nice, and not role playing it in thinking about worst case scenarios.
Yeah, you just didn't call me. That's your big problem.
Exactly. Yep. Well, it's the same thing. That's why I got into the pool room in the first place, because I didn't call you.
Yeah.
But a related story to that is talking about the owner versus the not necessarily the employees, but the owner putting too much trust in people, and not being in control. There was a situation that I was part of in China where the owner of the Q factory was told by his foreman that some of the machines were breaking down, right? So the owner of the Q factory took that opportunity then to order new machines, and modernize the factory a little bit more. And the foreman was told to pull the motors so that the motors would be kept, and then the other machines could be sold as scrap.
Yeah.
So he sold the machines and the motors for scrap prices that were, that was brought back into the company as income. And then magically, 2 weeks later, the foreman quits and starts up a cue making company down the road with those machines that were sold at scrap prices.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh,
the ones that
no.
were breaking down, remember?
Was he the one that said they were breaking down?
Yeah.
Oh no.
So that would be a good the fuck up there obviously was that the owner of the factory, who was in Taiwan at the time, didn't wait to come and inspect them himself or have somebody else look at it, and just placed a lot of trust in the guy that ended up lying his way into getting the machines and quitting and starting his own company. It would have been a lot harder to start your own company if you'd have had to buy all those machines new.
Well, good for that guy, but that's not great taking advantage of the company you're working for.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll end the episode on a little success for me. I guess a tentative success. We had a party here at the Turtlesmith offices a little while ago, and I got to talking with one of the people who were in attendance, and he had a clever idea for a new business in the cannabis space. And I got to talking with them, and through some of my connections and people I know, I think we've got a product in development. So I might share more on it later, but just from having a little party and a little networking skill, I think I got a new business venture. I'm very excited.
From what little I know about it, I would buy it.
I think it's going to be a good one. We'll have to see. I don't want to bury the lead and give away what we're doing, but I think once we get the product up and running and we got some samples, we'll maybe try some on the air and give it a shot and see if it works.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, well, I think that's it for this week. Find all the information on turtlesmith.com, and appreciate you being here.
Right. Yeah. And to remember, it's always important to not accept a P. Diddy invite.
Yeah, good Lord. Yeah. And if you like that kind of content, like and subscribe and all that good stuff.
Yeah, if you want more of that, like and subscribe. You can hear more
nonsense about P. Diddy from John.
Come on, that's a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. It
just kind of slips into your brain.
It's going to be there permanently now. I appreciate it. All right, man. We'll see you next week.
All right.